righty, folks. Welcome to Lead Generation Week. We are rocking and rolling today. We've got our final session today with the one and only Graham Skidmore of SaaS Solutions, formerly of Quicken Loans for a lifetime, I think. I want to first, before we bring on Graham and let him get started, I do want to mention just a couple things that I've mentioned before. One, most importantly, is about interacting and asking questions. You can do it two different ways, but we definitely want you to participate if possible. If you have some questions, no question is dumb. You can do it one of two ways. You can enter them into the app, which you may see on the right side of your screen. If you're on your desktop, there's a session Q&A. You can simply click on the button, ask a question, and then type it in there. Or there is also a Q&A little icon on the video, which goes right into Zoom, and we can see it there as well. So either one is fine. We'll get them answered, but please do ask questions. We get so much out of it when you guys ask those questions. So without any further ado, welcome, Graham. I appreciate you doing this. I'm just going to hand over to you and let you take it from here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me. And I think that the throwing it over was a nice way for Michael to say, all right, Graham, I'm tired of you. Yeah. I am a newbie to this world. Even though I've been in the industry for 21 years at Quicken Loans, I would always just, stuck behind the scenes. And so learning this new environment, comes with its own set of challenges and things. And so thankfully, I much appreciate all your patience here. And, with all the, and one of the things that caused me to want to get out and share some information a bit more is what's happened out there in the industry right now is really become indicative of the challenges that come due to the lack of ability to become granular enough with data and information for making decisions. So, I'm just going to jump right through here. Please, I guess, ask questions as we go. If not, we'll definitely stop at the end. And hopefully then everybody walks out here saying, yeah, I don't owe you an hour of your life back. So, okay. So, as many of you guys have all been around long enough to know that I'm not going to give you guys a bunch of new concepts. The value is going to come in the granularity of the information or the actionability of the information. And there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution in place, so I'm not here to try and even talk about a template or what everybody needs to be doing or the color of a page that should be, because there is not a one-size-fits-all approach. So instead, what I'm going to focus on is more of the questions to ask and how to find the answers and whatever that information is that's needed for you to be able to have the confidence needed to make the decisions. And one thing that's important, I think, for context as we go through this is that my background is I'm not a marketer, I'm not a CRM guy, and you know what? It might be a good idea for me to take a quick step back and let everybody know what I did at Quicken Loans, because jumping into that actually came across as very arrogant. So anyway, I thought that I just expect people to know me. I apologize, that was not the case. I spent 21 years at Quicken Loans. The first 13 years I spent in sales. When I started, there was 50 people in the sales side of the call center. Grew up to 2,000 around 2009. Jay Farner, who's the current CEO back then, the head of sales, said, Graham, I'm going to work on some other things. I'd like you to come with me. I don't know how it's going to go. So I gave me no guarantees. And I said, sure, yeah, I'll come along. I'll figure this out. And then the next question that was asked to me was, hey, we buy all these leads. We've got to be able to create some more monetization. So what can we do? And that stemmed into that. From there, that was a 300,000 leads a month, $200 million a year marketing budget-ish, and has morphed into $800 million a year marketing budget to 2.5 million leads a month. And so the demand outstripped the supply, so that also had to be addressed. This wasn't, and so I wanted to provide some of the information that I was able to use to segment and make decisions that were different and sometimes counterintuitive, frankly, but allowed me to continue to grow profitable market share and justify the increased spend. The 20 years at Quicken Loans. So I then was responsible for running all the performance marketing, the middle of the funnel lead management, the service and retention, as well as being the CEO of Lower My Bills. And I had those roles all at the same time, which allowed me to have a very unique digital behind the scenes point of view of the first party and third party lead generation or online lending market from very first eyeball seen to last check cashed from a point of view. So it was a very great opportunity to learn stuff that I normally would not have ever been able to see. So, I bring it up because this was just a problem solving exercise. Marketing, that's what marketing was. And so that's the way that I'm going to approach this. And it's going to be more from a problem solving point of view versus a marketing point of view, because it's the analytics that are really going to drive that next chapter or that next evolution. And the great news is a lot of times this stuff isn't that hard to find. It's just a matter of knowing where to look. So hopefully we will be able to provide everybody that type of information as well as we're going through this. And again, please ask as we're going along. So the first thing I want to introduce you guys is growth engineering. I had to come up with a methodology while at Quicken Loans because of traveling quite a bit. I found that my team members would be in conversations with different leaders or executives, whatever, and essentially whoever had the best title in the room made the decision, and those decisions may or may not have been the best decisions for the growth of the business or ROI. And so to prepare my team members and enable them to be able to have an educated conversation with leaders, executives, et cetera, I had to provide them with the facts, undisputable facts that would change the view that the executives and other leaders would have. So some highlights from that, and also Dan was involved in over 100-some businesses, and so getting pulled into things, I had to figure out some commonalities just for my own sanity. Right? So a couple of the key things that we'll identify is, the value, identify and value the fundings available overall and where in the funnel. What I mean by that is, a pool of leads comes in, and how do you know? How do you know what's good, what's not good? Who should call it? Who should not call it? How do you know? How do you set goals? And where in the funnel that exists? So you may have the closings come into the top of the funnel that are needed to help you hit goal, but if they don't reach the actual salespeople, and then also understand where the drop-off points are between the contact, second callbacks, third callbacks, credit reports, application, et cetera, the lack of that specificity information makes it much harder to create strategies that will move the needle. So we want to identify where those sales exist. And obviously, because I'm going about this as a math problem, it's much easier to take things from gambles to guarantees wherever there are questions. Now, for example, do the leads stink, or are the salespeople being lazy? That is a constant or a consistent theme. People that I speak to, and being able to factually, it's not a matter of who's right or wrong, it's just a matter of what the truth is, so that proper strategies and tactics can be set. And some of this may seem like it's geared more towards a lender than a lead generator or lead aggregator, but that's not the case. I lump it all together because at the end of the day, everyone's problems are everyone's problems. If lenders aren't able to close aggregator leads, well, it makes it tough for aggregators to sell their leads. And if lead generators can't originate loans from aggregator leads, it's going to make them much harder to grow and expand. So, understanding what moves the needle for everybody is something that's valuable for everyone. So, obviously, then, if you are dealing with objective and factual evidence-based information, it's going to be much easier to create confidence in members that this is the right situation, this is the proper analysis, this is where the opportunities are, and they can put into then use skills to focus on solving the problem and prescribe a solution versus just trying to put together a report and send to somebody else. And obviously, as well, there's a likelihood of success, and a part of that, as an easy example, would be simply forecasting every part of the funnel and are the actions, campaigns, et cetera, realistic to achieve. So if somebody needs to send an email campaign, it has to have a 30% open rate in order for it to be successful. Yeah, pretty low likelihood that that's going to happen. So let's identify what those type of things are in a business plan, et cetera, so we can adjust appropriately. And then that gets back into also starting to identify the items that are the most critical to affect the outcome, along with, I'm going to get into more specifics as we go here, guys. The most critical, but then also, what do I have control over? What don't I have control over? How can I influence these things? What can I influence? These are all some of the questions that need to be answered in order to put yourself in as much control of influencing the situation or the outcome as possible. And for me, that's always what I'm focused on. So that's the common theme, I guess, as we go through this. And then that obviously provides the diagnostics and the forecasting. So if conversion is not what you would expect it to be, you can know why. It is not a secret. And also you can forecast what conversion should be. Again, we'll start to get into that, but it really stems all from the ingredients. Right? This is a the fun few controversial, potentially controversial topics. One of them here is ingredients. The thing for me was that I focused more on the ingredients than I did what to do with the ingredients. So whether it be a CRM, marketing automation, take your pick, all of those were simply things to make decisions based on the information provided to it. So those tools are only as good as the intelligence. So if I can improve the intelligence, I can improve the tools. And if I'm accepting the confinement of the amount of fundings occurring in a set of leads, any given, doesn't matter how it's put together, if that is a set number, then that is a set number. And so therefore performance can all be judged accordingly based against that. And so everything stems back to the ingredients. So I focus everything on trying to figure out what are the ingredients, what is the good lead, and not just this lead is better than this lead, because that's nice to know. But what's really great to know is that these leads hold this amount of fundings. And then that amount of fundings either reaches my goals or it does not reach my goals, and being able to answer those questions why. And then I think everybody struggles from a lender point of view, and then the lead aggregator point of view, everyone is most interested in the answers to number 4. Right? And being able to factually know what opportunity is available. So I'm going to introduce a term called closings, or market share of closings, instead of an industry market share. They're obviously very, very different. And what a market share or closings market share would be is of the leads you received, or anybody received, the closings that occurred, what % happened with you, what % happened with others, and then from there, a reasonable assessment of what growth is available can be made. So if there were 100 leads that came in, and let's just say 10 of them resulted in a funded loan, well, as a lender, should I expect to have 1, 2, 3, 4 of those, 5 of those, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50% market share? And then obviously that information makes it much easier to know where the end of the road is for production or funded loans based on the leads that I'm receiving currently. And so if that's short, then I got to go find some new ones. So now, this is another thing that I found in talking to people and doing some digging, is that there's a tremendous amount of information everywhere. I should say data everywhere. However, the ability to put it together into actionable information is lacking. So, and then the next part of that here, right, is the cost to mine it can be cost prohibitive. And what I mean by the status quo is, if people think that if somebody out there believes that the only places to get some information are the high cost of like a data provider, I don't want to say anyone's name, don't really think of picking on anybody, but of a large data provider, but that's not needed. There are a lot of smaller, more cost-effective alternatives to find solutions. And a lot of it depends on how much directional information the decision can be made on versus exact information that's needed. Both are available, but let's face it, there's no reason to pay more for something than you need to if you're not going to receive the value from it. So, so speaking of receiving the value, there's a few things that I wanted to touch base on. This is the second. I thought there might be something that's potentially controversial. And if, in case anyone's still wondering, how does any of this tie into your marketing being able to sustain varying markets? The reason for that is because when you tie yourself into the ingredients, and then the ingredients dictate or govern what the outcome can be, or the performance, then it's just a matter of optimizing how do I take the most from the fundings available to pull it all the way through to the performance. And so in order to do that, it's always helpful to have some, things that are just the norms and standards. I call it marketing laws, like gravity. It's pretty hard to build an airplane. If you're Boeing and you don't believe in gravity, It's gonna be pretty tough. So so I want to give some examples of some things that I have thought of or that I have learned over the years that, or debatable topics. And so the first one is the filters. You know, I know that this is an 80-20 comment here. There's no doubt that there are exceptions, but generally speaking, to a lender, but when a lead generator says, "Hey," oh, sorry guys, I bounced. By tying stuff into the ingredients, you know if the market conditions change and if there's less funding being made available inside of your opportunity. And when you see the market opportunity and circumstances change, then you know it's time to adjust the business. And so that's why tying into the ingredients is critical to being able to always understand what's going on around you and how to navigate it. And then once you can expect it, anticipate it, you can prepare for it. So within the marketing laws, what do I got here? So a lender paid for every lead but didn't receive every lead. So when you get the filters, I mean, what it costs a lead generator to generate a pool, remember it's anonymous, right? Not like, you know, generally speaking, there's a level of anonymity that is occurring. And so therefore there's only just so much influence that a lead generator has in that scenario. So essentially if somebody wants to filter, somebody wants to reduce what's coming, they want to reduce the ineffective leads or records coming to the top of the funnel, you can do that with filters. Downside to that is as a lender, you paid for names that you didn't get a chance to use or to market to. And if you would have been buying those leads, I would be willing to bet that the lead cost between buying them all or buying with the filters is probably not much different. So something to look into to figure out what's the best way to go with the business. If you want to have the filters into the top of the funnel, or you can always weed them out before they get to the sales force as well and accomplish the same thing, but now give yourself the names and records to market to in the future. And then closed loop data is a huge one. And I saw this when we did the acquisition of Lower My Bills, and we started sharing closed loop data with them. And I also saw this even before that when we started sharing up to, I think, setup or loan origination data back. And this was a thing that was very fearful, close to the vest information to give up. But I can tell you that after I gave it up, that was one of the things that was a huge contributor to the growth spurt that happened. And the reason that I was able to make that decision and not worry about giving somebody insight or access to information that could hurt me was that I realized this information is available to anybody anyway. And so I figured out how to know if somebody is going to take advantage of trying to use that information with me, or if, you know, the circumstances and things changed. So if I want more closed loans, I want to send that information back to the lead generator so they can find more closed loans versus transfers. So the adaptation, this kind of comes from some conversations that I'll have with people where they will talk to me about how they need to get online and they want to be online, but they need it to be this way, this way, this way, and this way. Well, it doesn't work that way. And so, you know, if somebody wants to establish a revenue channel built on the aggregator space, then they're going to have to accept that current business practices aren't going to reach those customers. Otherwise, they'd already be happening. Right? So that means the business has to make a decision whether or not they're going to change their practices because the opportunity is large enough, or outsource it. There's all kinds of ways to solve and stick to your core of what you're good at and outsource what you're not. Likewise, and then this one on the nimble with the ROI, I think this is an important thing. And this is the time, this applies to the whole budget, everything, was both separating out the marketing plan between covering fixed costs and overall growth, and kind of treating the fixed cost as its own little separate business inside of the business that always has to be maintained. You don't screw with it. You don't mess with it. It's what gives the confidence to make the other investments of time and money into larger strategies, et cetera. And there is a difference between knowing that you are going to achieve that minimum and having that minimum separated inside of, I'll call it, accounts and reporting and things like that. it does provide you different views and outlooks. And so if we were talking about how to find that last mile, then that's an example of some of the more granular type information that is helpful if you're reaching a ceiling, but the directional information is good because if there's, say maybe, small and not a lot of leads coming to the door, then you don't need to worry about getting to that degree to be able to grow and have success. And this one is a favorite of mine. Putting out of business the telephone companies and the conversations about the antiquated ways of calling a lead and getting somebody to business. I don't think anybody disagrees with any of the comments about it, but the reality is, and I'm telling everybody this is a factual thing, in the mortgage industry, it's different than Amazon, right? So there's a lot more stake. People are not nearly as comfortable to do the level of financial transactions or engage solo on their own self-generated or self-guided, on a mortgage transaction. So the reason why salespeople will always gravitate towards what works. So antiquated, it's because what works. So trying to figure out how to best go with the momentum or the flow of the current is, in my opinion, a much better use of time, and how to cement consistency into something. Then that might be an example of something that would fall underneath your fixed cost bucket. But then when you're dealing with your variable, I guess budget or whatever, then you can start to adjust or optimize contact methods, etc. That's another reason to keep them separate. The replication, this is an important one because it goes back to the math problem and things being a factual, objective discussion, which is extremely helpful in problem solving. And what I have seen happen time and time again is that, say a sales contest is a good example, or something happen. Sales contest, yeah. Production spikes for a day, but then there always seems to be that hangover. And it's always referred to as the hangover. Well, it's not. All that happened is the amount of funding available stayed the same. They just got pulled through faster. So I have yet to be able to find, and this is not a knock or anything else, it's just about accepting boundaries. And it's also, I think it's pretty logical that a machine, when you start talking about scale, is going to be more effective than a human being would be. Right? And so the systems and the processes are really going to be the thing that is key to being able to make the aggregator channel work. And why is it about making the aggregator? It's not about aggregator. Almost any channel, any marketing channel work. It's about removing the variables in that situation. So if there are best practices to be shared about when or a company's direction of contact methods, communication, et cetera, well, then there needs to be institutional ownership of the client record or the lead, and there needs to be institutional ownership of the path of that lead and the contacting of it, et cetera. And so that is all really important to make. If you want to have marketing be sustainable in all environments, then there has to be a lot of influence that can be asserted when it's needed. And this doesn't mean that none of this is about removing any individual thought. What this is about is when two people are in a room, let's say, arguing or debating what's the right way to do something, let's find the answer and then have the discussion. So you have a much more productive discussion. And everything stems from expectations, which is weird. So there's also, so going back to thinking about the ingredients and setting up expectations, in an automobile, when you purchase it, you know what the expectations are. They tell you got a speedometer, they tell you the top end speed, they tell you the type of fuel that it needs, and then they tell you the type of tires, that are needed and the maintenance required in order for this car to operate at its peak performance. So you know that if you do these things, you should get this peak performance. Well, there's no version of that in the mortgage industry. If you want peak performance, first of all, how's that defined? Which is a whole another thing. And how do you know that if it being defined is a realistic goal or not a realistic goal? Or maybe it's undershot. Maybe there's way more opportunity in front of us, or maybe there's even less opportunity. Maybe people are doing an awesome job, but they're just tapped out on their closed loan market share, and so new lead sources need to be had. The important thing was finding out the information, and so being able to set expectations properly based on the opportunity available is going to be much more valuable than performing against a random goal or against a peer group. And those, I'm not saying that those things are wrong by any means. This is one of those things where it depends on where someone's business is, which of those works. Right? If I'm somebody who's buying 10 to 50 leads a day, and I'm just making this up, and I'm converting them, I don't know, at 3, 4, 5%, and I know that somebody else is similar to wanting leads from the same place as I do in states, and they're converting them at 7%. Okay, well, then I believe I can probably do 7%, and that's good enough to make these decisions by. But then it's accepting that 7% is the new definition of success. If it's not 7, there's money left on the table. And again, then the specificity behind who got the lead, who contacted, who closed it, didn't, all of that information is available as support with the goal setting and the look back of here's what we thought would happen, and then here's actually what happened to validate the model as well, or even just the thinking behind the specificity of here's who closed, here's who they closed with. Is it consistent? Is it not consistent? Is it all, is this all over the board? I can tell you that there is very little variation amongst that statistic, which is the percent of closings that occur inside of any lead set. Very little difference. So when you learn that information, you can feel confident making some of those decisions and sticking to them. And so, I've started already kind of talk about some of the dangers of each one of these. Really the big challenge is when you have to spend much more time or invest more time and money than what was needed because you have the ability to anticipate an issue, or if making sure that we're even being set up for success. There's a very big difference between characteristics of a lead and a good lead. A good lead is somebody who buys. Characteristics of a lead might be a FICO, a state, et cetera. And so knowing and accepting that this is the amount of leads and the type of closed loan volume to expect just allows much greater accuracy with goal setting, which then helps buy-in because people see it happening, and I think, when somebody doesn't feel like the goal is realistic up front, very rarely does it ever happen. Very rarely does it get support and buy-in, which is another value of trying to be very transparent with a lot of this information is putting internal support because everybody is now speaking the same language as understanding the why behind how decisions are made and the level of influence that the people have over each of those decisions also increases because they've now increased their influence, increased the influence of the decision makers throughout the different parts of the funnel, the different parts of the business to now be advocates. And so that was another goal of trying to provide that type of information. And that's, I talked about this earlier as well, but stick on the market shifts, right? I would have a couple of market proxies. So if I would see dips on my lead flow, first thing I would do is I would call 1 or 2 lead generators, look to see what they have seen. Then I would look to understand, are other people coming in and buying up the ads? Whatever the lead generator or aggregator told me was going on, I would then figure, okay, how do I go out and validate this is what's going on? I can honestly tell you, I'm struggling to think of a time where I came across misinformation or I felt like somebody wasn't truthful with me. So anybody involved, take that for what that's worth. Like there's probably a lot more trusted information available out there. But finding proxies that let you know that the landscape is changing is important. I don't know if this is the case, but I would see that usually on a mortgage banker's, the originations, mortgage banker associations, week-over-week originations, Quicken Loans would tend to be 2 weeks ahead of whatever the next change is going to be. So if rates were going to dip, or that you're going to start to see a surge in production, you would start to see that at Quicken Loans about 2 weeks in advance. And then when you're about to start to see a dip, you would see that happen about 2 weeks ahead of everybody else as well. So it can be little things like that. So really what it boils down to is whatever questions you have, most likely the information's available. So it really boils down to, is it realistic to get the information, the energy, the time, energy, money, it's that it costs to get the information? And are there cheaper alternatives? But most importantly, what are the big questions that you need answers to make the decisions that you need to make and have confidence making those? And I also had a lot of success even just tossing around some of those type of questions in different environments. I will also say I've been pleasantly surprised at how supportive the world really is. I've only worked at one place, and when asking for help or ideas or thoughts, and it's wonderful. It's been a very pleasant surprise. So, enlist your followers, your friends, whatever the right term is, in helping you to find the information or find access to the information. A simple thing would be take leads that were 6 months old. Call them. You start asking people. Ask people if they're closed. Yes, some people will lie to you. Some people will be truthful with you. You do that for a month or two, 3 months, you'll see that there's either a level of consistency or there isn't. If there is consistency, then it's pretty safe to assume that the information is directionally accurate, which is most likely good enough just to make decisions on it and be confident setting expectations of this is how many fundings are available to me and what can I do and identifying where the point of diminishing returns will occur and anticipate that so you can start to work on those strategies now in anticipation of that. That's what really, those are for me, when I just started thinking about a lot of the big keys, it's about influence and it's also about aligning yourself with everybody around you's success. The next probably biggest thing that there is when it comes to surviving all of the markets is aligning success with everybody. It's kind of crazy to think about it, right? A lender can be successful at the expense of a lead generator, and a lead generator aggregator can be successful at the expense of a lender. Well, there's a big problem right there. Why is it that way? I don't think anybody wants to do it. Nobody wants to ever, do ill will to somebody else. But I think that my opinion is the reason why that exists is because there's not the buy-in industry-wide of what information would be provided that would make everybody feel comfortable to align on that topic of determining good, because the lead generators can't control the salespeople or the loan officers, and the loan officers can't control the ads and everything else, et cetera. But I can tell you that there's a lot more smoke than there is fire on those topics. And so as well, whether it's here asking questions or otherwise, please, anything that I can do to bridge any of those gaps, love to. And so I think another important part of being able to survive all of the markets is you got to limit the amount of choices available to you. Right? Not everything can be a variable. There has to be something that's fixed. Every sports has accepted guidelines or limitations. So by being able to fix or by distinguishing between what you can control and what you can't control, it just helps to make the decision and the picture much more clear. And then it also then starts to open up, it also starts to get into your risks. I don't have control over this, but if it were to go away, what does it do to my business? If that's bad, then do I need to create some strategic partnerships? How do I shore this up? Right? And so it's really about kind of picking apart your business and establishing all the different pieces and what is the margin for error for the, oh crap, I got to shut doors, and the, holy cow, this is amazing, and I'm going to be scaling like crazy until I can't scale anymore. And when you put things in realistic ranges, it's amazing to me. It sounds something so simple, but there's so many things that should have never been done that were done, and that the time and energy and money could have been totally avoided by all parties involved if they knew that some of the information or answers were available ahead of time. So my hopes are to create some unification amongst definitions of like what's a good lead, what's good conversion, what are marketing laws or things that can be trusted. Because the more that the industry, doesn't matter what side of it you're on, starts to become unified, the more we can start to bring, I'm just going to call it a free market back to this space. We don't have one right now. It's dictated by, you know, a few players, and those few players will determine whether or not there's innovation and growth, and that will only benefit them as their main focus if they're going to be pushing something. It's not right or it's not wrong, there's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. I am simply stating that there's a lot more opportunity available for people if they rely on using what's called IP to solve problems than thinking it's going to have to require a large bank account or a large budget. So please, that's what I want to ask away. So there was a question here. What is an appropriate way to partner with a lead generator that ensures both companies are invested in the success of the campaign? You know, I'm chuckling because that really is one of the biggest challenges, right? Is how do you know who to trust? And depending on the size of somebody, there's very few nationwide lenders. So what works for one person isn't necessarily going to work for another. And then you do start to get a self-fulfilling prophecy of you know, reputation and then that company's performance on its leads. So the things that I've always done when I determined who I would partner with, if I would have a partnership or a vendorship, was based upon how they handled stuff when things were going wrong, or their desire to build and create something, and their level of involvement. So, because I always expected something to go wrong. It's always boggled my mind when people try to totally avoid any problems, like that's like, or any risk. Banks tend to really focus on risk aversion at all costs. You know, there's too much revenue and upside that's thrown away with that. So asking somebody up front to give me, okay, so you're going to launch this. What are you looking to see after launch? What are the things that when you see them are going to tell you, should we do this? Should we not do? Should we continue this because it looks like it's got a chance of being profitable, or should we pull back? What types of changes should we make? What information are you looking to see? And, you know, ask them, how are you going to help me become successful with your product? And very quickly, you're going to realize if someone has just been pitching you something that they had off of a slideshow presentation, or if they really are understanding what's involved in the business, and if they don't even know what's going on in the business, that's okay too, if they are willing to be invested in your business with you. Then those are the people that I tend to focus with, and then it's a matter of just right pricing the situation. And I would much rather have a low quality, highly invested person with my business than I would a low quality or a very high quality, low invested person, you know, with my business. That's just me. So hopefully that, you know, that's helpful. Let's see here. How do you recommend we distribute leads to the right salespeople that will encourage the most sales and who are the highest performers? Wow. So this was a crazy one. And this was impactful, but I definitely almost got myself ran out of Detroit, Michigan by the loan officers or sales force at Quicken Loans, because we introduced some measurement to speak to this. Right? I didn't believe that it was fair for the success and paycheck of somebody to be determined by luck of the draw. Luck of the draw is what lead somebody gets. So I had to figure out how to establish the value of, you know, I'd stack, how to sort and sift records appropriately or segment them so that I could know who to give what leads to. And then from there's a bunch of testing. There is I'll give you guys one thing. There's the question of, is it better to give a high converting lead to a low performer or a high converting lead to a high performer? What's going to be the best for your overall business? Like I said, I've tested a bunch of different times, and you're always better off to play your strengths. Better the better will do you well. And so in that framework of giving the lead to somebody, it's not as simple as the right lead to the right person. It also has to be taken into consideration the practical component, the practicality that if new loan officers don't have enough fundings available in their leads, they quit because they can't make any money. So there has to be a balance between I'm segmenting out enough quality so that my new people have a chance to be successful. And I can see who will arise as the next generation, with also preserving the opportunity and the fundings available getting them and maximizing that. And that also kind of gets into the kind of the two separate business plans of the fixed and variable as well in that insight. And I will also tell you that one of the most valuable, or not influential metrics was the percent of good quality leads. And obviously got something a little bit vague just because I want to make sure I don't give away any secret sauce and things. So if you feel free to ask questions or ask me to be more specific, and I will where I can, was that if there wasn't a high enough percent of the good quality leads captured by the ideal group, it was the 20 to 25% difference in the conversion. That's meaningful. So so one of the ways that we were able to do that is we figured out how to normalize or handicap the leads to bankers. So you could take a look at how did you do on the same leads as your peer group? And that's how we should perform. Because why should I pay top dollar for somebody to provide what was already going to happen? What I will pay, I'll pay well above top dollar for somebody who can get me incremental, because that incremental is highly valuable to me, so I wouldn't be able to get it otherwise. Again, so like I said, I almost got ran out of Dodge because there was a little bit of a little black box of how those things were calculated. It was a lot of data. It was all on the up and up. But I found that to be the most accurate way to identify the salespeople who actually were the best salespeople, not just the best lead takers. Figure out how to figure out that system. So hopefully that answers the question. Now, please ask me a follow up. And really, aside from aligning yourself with your success with your vendors or your buyers, right, and being able to then have the insight so that there can be much more fact-based decisions and known information, frankly, the decisions are made with, then it becomes, that's what really makes it a lot easier to navigate all environments. The information has to be normalized. This goes on correctly. The individuality that people think that every individual is going to contribute to a situation that can change things as soon as it can't be modeled, et cetera, is not accurate. It's got to be, you just got to accept that some of it is what it is for the sake of making the decisions to grow. And, it's been in business for a while now. It's very rarely is there a giant smoking bullet for somebody's success. It's usually a lot of little things, and a lot of times it's small things, simple things. And so simple things like focusing on sales, not leads, focusing on how many sales you talk to determine what you should have done, just changes the whole view. So I'm hoping to continue on this type of dialogue and conversation, that people have interest in, pulling away some of the curtain and debunking things or providing help so that everybody can continue to grow and take advantage, because there's a tremendous amount of opportunity out there for everybody still that's not taken up by the Quicken Loans or Loan Depots. And I'd love to be able to provide everybody insight, help them get it. So if there's any other questions, cool. If not, then I guess I will wrap up and give everybody a little bit of time back in their day.
Perfect. Thanks, Graham. And they can get a hold. Let's before we wrap up, how can they get a hold of you directly to be able to discuss some of the things in more detail with you and maybe get some more specific questions answered as well?
It's Graham at SAF Solutions, or call me, text me. My cell is 248-818-0257. And like I said, if someone was seeming vague, I'm not trying to be evasive. I just maybe didn't understand the specificity needed. I'm happy, but I want to. So please ask.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very, very much. It was awesome information you shared. And for anybody that wants to get a hold of them, you can reach out to him at Graham at sathsolutions.com, or go to his website, which is up on the screen, and reach out to him directly. So thank you all for joining, and thanks, Graham, for providing the excellent information.
Have a great week, everybody. Thank you again, Michael, for putting us on in this unique time.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. All right. Take care.